Hey, soccer fans and Chicago Fire fans, welcome back to Feed the Fire, a Chicago Fire and MLS podcast. I'm your host, Nick. This is episode 56, A Tale of Two Teams, the Chicago Fire. And I say that because tonight we are celebrating their huge win in front of a record-setting crowd against Inter Miami last Wednesday. And then we are also commiserating their return to same old Fire with their 2-0 loss to Charlotte just a few days later. Same building, same pitch, different Fire team. So that is how we are going to begin our show, recapping those two games along with all my comments and things that I noticed when watching them. Now, in the second half of the show, we're going to start off with a little bit of a story from a dark story from my Chicago Fire history as a fan, and there's a point to it. And then we're also going to wrap up by finishing the show with a preview of the NYCFC match, looking at the playoff picture, and there's some big Fire news out there if you haven't heard some of the rumors and reporting going around on Twitter involving a certain central midfielder. So make sure you stay tuned to hear all of that and plenty more on Feed the Fire. Well, Fire fans, once again, we're back talking about an enigmatic Chicago Fire team, a puzzling Chicago Fire team. But I've also gotten some good feedback from our listeners, enjoying my stories of my U8 coaching. So I'll start you off with another one here. We had a great game, 5-4 victory. My son bagged 2 goals, his first multi-goal game. He's now scored 3 goals in 2 games. Couldn't be more proud of him. And if you didn't tune in the last time, I think he's adopted his signature celebration of the airplane, just running downfield with his arms outstretched. And what was funny is he did it last time on his own, but for this most recent game, now his teammates started joining in with him. So there was like a whole train of kids doing the airplane back down the field after he scored. It's been a lot of fun. But really, the funniest part about this game is the opposing coach was so mad that one of my 7-year-olds didn't shake his hand, which is completely false. I coach him up. They know good sportsmanship. Our assistant coaches look for it. I know the kid. He shook everyone's hand. And if he didn't, it's only because this particular coach actually was clapping when this kid got a yellow card the first time our teams played. And that's only because this coach was screaming at the referee that the kid, who is a foot taller than his players, as well as probably about 20 pounds bigger, muscular kid for 7th grade, right? Keeps fouling his players who just kind of mob around the ball and don't know positioning. So yeah, this grown man, that's the backstory. This grown man, I mean, he's a grown man technically, but his behavior was worse than the 7-year-olds on the pitch. After the handshake line, decides to walk towards me and scream in my face about my team not having good sportsmanship and that how my players need to all be suspended for negative sportsmanship. Again, this is a man who I'm assuming is in his late 30s-ish, maybe early 40s at the oldest, screaming at me because of what a 7-year-old did to him, or what he perceived a 7-year-old did to him. Yeah, so that was an interesting experience. The only thing I could muster in my just confused sense was, hey, just worry about your own team. And then I just walked away. And I think that did enough to set him off even further as he went complaining to a group of dads on his bench who were probably just as bad. But yeah, I got to tell you, never a boring day at the U8 rec league games here. So anyway, you guys are here to listen to the Chicago Fire. As much fun as crazy soccer coach stories are, soccer dad stories are. Looking back on this game against Miami, the Chicago Fire played like we have never seen them play this season. They've had games where they've scored multiple goals before. They've, 3 and 4 goals before. They've had games where they've had convincing wins. But in this game against Miami, there was just another level to how well the Chicago Fire were playing. And we're going to look at the stats and see if it bears out, if the stats meet the eye test here. But for me as a fan, there was such a buzz around this game leading up to it, the day of the game, and even the day or two afterwards. I even tweeted out like I'm still buzzing like on a Thursday afternoon. Like it was wild just how great it felt to have this high profile game. And even without Leo Messi and even without all the stupid signs, I want my money back, I got robbed, all in Greek, the Vlakias, the idiocies of it all. It was a playoff atmosphere, do or die. People were there to see a good soccer game, and maybe you didn't see a good soccer game from Miami, but you saw a good soccer game, at least from the Chicago perspective, but probably, for a neutral fan overall, a great first MLS experience. I mean, fireworks, 60,000 plus people in the stands, 5 goals. You saw the Chicago Fire's star, well, alleged, supposed star, Xherdan Shaqiri, scoring 2 goals. You saw Fabian Herbers, the guy who's been with the Fire for, I think, 5 years now, with 2 assists. Their new signing, Marin Haile Selassie, with a couple goals. Gaston Jimenez stepping up and making some really solid plays in the midfield. I think one of his tackles and forced turnovers ends up leading directly to a goal because he just stepped up, picks the pocket, plays the through ball, next pass, it ends up being the assist. So you had your best and brightest stepping up. You had the atmosphere, you had the fireworks, like I said. It was just a phenomenal match atmosphere. And the Fire did a great job doing it. And not only just creating a buzz on the field with the players. Yes, it was all tied to Messi. We understand that. We've talked about that in the past. But also creating a buzz for the fans about season tickets and credits and other fan experiences and things of that nature. So they did an excellent job from top to bottom in this organization. This is what the Chicago Fire should be looking like most weeks in MLS. Now, did the statistics bear out on how well we all think this game went after such an ecstatic and exuberant build-up and finale, a 4-1 victory here, right? In possession, the Fire only had 37% of the possession. Now, a lot of that was Miami, I think, at the end of the game. And the Fire made some defensive substitutions towards the end of the second half and really ceded some possession there. But Miami did have possession early on in the game, but really couldn't turn it into anything. And in fact, the Chicago Fire, Brady only had 1 save on the night, according to MLSsoccer.com. Now, it's what you do with the possession, right? Possession numbers can only mean so much. The Fire ended up with 15 shots, 7 on goal. I think that's one of the highest on goal shot totals I've seen of them all year. Meanwhile, Miami had 10 shots and only 2 on goal. So you have the Fire actually creating some offense, despite only 37% possession, only 326 passes, and only 80% passing accuracy. Meanwhile, a team like Miami ended up with 570 passes and 88% passing completion. But we know that Miami loves to just knock those short balls around in the middle third of the field and between their defensive third, middle third of the field, their defenders and their central midfielders, just real knocking the ball back and forth, 1-2 touching, just kind of, they're not intentionally padding stats, but they're just trying to draw some defenders out of position and see if they can make a play then up the middle. And I think that is what really ruined Miami, is that Miami's strength is playing up the middle, especially when they had Messi in the lineup, when they had Jordi Alba in the lineup. Busquets was able to link up with Messi. He could play through balls to Messi. Jordi Alba could play through balls to Messi, or Busquets could play those long balls over the top to the wingers rushing or to Joseph Martinez more centrally. They did not have that today without Alba and Messi. Busquets was kept in check. Jimenez had a great game. Doumbia had a better game than what we're used to seeing from him in a Fire uniform. And really, Miami tried to play their typical game plan up the middle, and the Fire just were there to stop that kind of through play. And it really then turned into offense. We saw one of the goals that Jimenez kicked the play off, right? The Fire also had some really good wing play and were beating Miami down the wings. We saw Fabian Herbers with some crosses. I'll use his appropriate name after a 2-assist night. Fabian Herbers Had some great runs down the wing, played some great crosses in, resulting in 2 assists. Haile Selassie gets into dangerous positions in the box after making his runs down the wing. So the Fire avoided Miami's strengths when the Fire were attacking, and then the Fire also were able to snuff out Miami's strength when the Fire were defending. So this was just a solid overall performance by the Chicago Fire. Looking at some of the other statistics, 10 crosses for the Fire, 4 offsides, 45 duels won to Miami's 31. So you saw the Fire were hustling. They were putting in the extra effort, turning those 50-50 balls into 60-40 or 70-30 balls, as some of the announcers like to say. 10 tackles to Miami's 5. 12 clearances, 12 fouls, only 1 yellow card. And in a hyped up game like that was, to only come away with 1 yellow card as the Fire team, I'll give it to them. So really the statistics, I think, it really painted a good picture that the Fire were efficient in possession. They didn't use the ball a lot. When they had the ball, quick counter-attacking up the wings or playing much more direct. Now, if you want to look at the advanced goal scoring numbers here, the Fire ended up with 2.8 expected goals. Miami, 1.8 expected goals. Again, off those Chicago 15 shots, 7 on target. So they were actually creating much more higher percentage scoring chances this game. Few player notes on this game now that we've knocked out the stats. Last episode, I talked a lot about Yorgos Koutsias, the young Greek striker who what kind of striker is he going to be? Is he going to be that hold-up striker? Is he going to be a little bit stronger, someone they can play through or play to or play off of? Or is he going to be more of a kind of pouncing on the box, just kind of a hustle guy? What we've seen though is in this game he was kind of being coached to almost be that target striker, which I don't think he has the frame or the skill set for. If you watched his movement in this Miami game, anytime there was a turnover in the middle of the field, he, as the center striker, would immediately make a dash for the penalty spot and wait to receive a long ball over the top. And then if that wasn't there, or if whoever created the turnover ends up playing laterally or playing wide, then Koutsias would break his runoff and then get into a different supporting position. So he's running straight at the penalty spot. Even when you saw it in the attacking third, when the ball was played into the wings and the wings were ready to play a cross in or recycle it back around, Koutsias was always immediately making his first movement to the penalty spot. It sounded like, it looked like Frank Lopez and the coaching staff just told him, just run to the PK spot and they'll get you the ball. And that's what he was doing. So his initial run of getting into a dangerous spot is good. He's picking his spot. He's making his run to it. Now what he needs to work on is when that ball doesn't get played to him immediately, when he makes that first run, he can't just stand at the penalty spot, because then the keeper is going to be able to read the ball to him. The defenders are going to be able to step up and mark him. And at this point, these big center defenders, these big center backs, are a physical mismatch, and Koutsias will not be able to match up with them. So he needs to, I think, adopt a little bit more of movement in the box. Get to that PK spot if that's where you're being coached. Fine. Get to that spot where the wingers and the midfielders are going to be playing the crosses or the long balls into. And again, if they're coaching them that way, that's perfect. Then everyone's on the same page. It's just a matter of execution. But when that ball's not there right away, now he needs to start moving around the box and learning how to draw defenders out of position to mark him and open things up for other players. Or if he's reading a kind of a zone defense, finding soft spots in the zone, getting in between the lines when the ball's recycled around, and then working as that little 1-2 setup man, hold up man that I and some other fans think that he can develop into. So that, I think, it was something that really stood out to me about watching Koutsias play and where he can take his next developmental steps. The other thing that stood out to me, Shaqiri, Herbers, Jimenez, all the maligned players stepped up. All the guys that have been lightning rods for the most criticism this season all stepped up in this game. Shaqiri played out of his mind. There was one point where I'm like, oh shoot, he's walking. This is just like that goal from a few months ago where he's walking and they play the ball right past him and he doesn't even make a move to it. Thankfully, that one moment he walked didn't come back to bite him, but he was hustling. He was running down balls to the sideline. He's running in and out. He was dancing a little bit, doing some technical moves there. Like he might even make one of those MLS Techers videos that I guess people love to see. He was just playing so well. Fabian Herbers making all the right runs, making inch perfect passes. The Selassie goal that was assisted from Herbers. Oh my goodness! For the way he threaded that ball through two defenders right to Selassie, and the way Selassie finished it, like that's fantastic. And then Jimenez shutting down Miami in the middle and launching counterattacks. These were the three guys who, had they just played that much better throughout the course of the regular season, just a little bit better, a little bit more consistent, the Fire wouldn't be talking about, can we make the playoff game? It would be, are we going to end up in the 6th spot or the 8th spot? Like they would have the points at this point. Have the points at this point. Yep, that's what I said. They'd have the points at this point in order to be looking at seeding instead of whether they'll make the playoffs. Well, fans, I hope you celebrated this victory in the Miami match and everything it meant for the club as much as you could have, and on the night it happened. And I have to say that because, first of all, we don't get to celebrate a lot of these huge victories so much. Like, this is what the club could be. This is the vision for the future. And on top of it just being a big 4-1 win, we needed to celebrate it. I think everybody did. We should have celebrated it, because now, a week later and another game later, we are analyzing this Miami win in the context of the Chicago Fire following it up with a disappointing loss in the same building 4 days later to Charlotte. So for me now, looking at that context of having a 2-game stretch here to review it, to me, the Miami game is a perfect exhibit A of what's wrong with the Chicago Fire as a club and a franchise. First of all, the Fire have enough talent to beat the bottom of the MLS. We saw them dominate Miami in this game, even without the ball. They controlled the game. I think that was pretty evident. 38%, 37% possession, but they always felt like they were in control of the game, but for, maybe 10, 15 minutes tops during the whole course of the game. So they have the talent to beat the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Saw them beat Miami. They scored a bunch of goals against Miami in the first game. They played against them. They won their first game against Montreal 3-0. They beat Toronto 1 game handily. I think I'm just going back and I'm looking at some of these results. The Fire have the talent to be a lot better than the bottom part of the Eastern Conference. But the problem is they don't play like it most games. And along those lines, the roster isn't too far off from being competitive in that kind of 6 to 8, maybe 5 to 7 Eastern Conference table. Because we saw how well Shaqiri, your designated player, Martin Haile Selassie, an international signing in the transfer window, Fabian Herbers, one of your veterans, Brian Gutierrez, Chris Brady, your homegrowns, Gaston Jimenez, international TAM. You even saw in the Miami game, Kasper Shabilko took off the cement blocks and actually was playing with cleats. He was actually running and making good runs. Another high TAM player, right? Your signings were there. Now you round that roster out just a little bit, and you should be in the conversation again, maybe 5 to 7, 6 to 8 or so. So the Chicago Fire, again, the point is they weren't too far off from the playoffs on the talent perspective, but they don't play to their talent most games. And again, the people we just spoke about as being so exceptional in Miami, this is one of very, very few games we've spoken to their exceptionality. Shaqiri, Shabilko, Herbers to a lesser extent. And also, Miguel Navarro. This guy was supposed to be your starting left back. He was supposed to be your guy to help not only with some one-on-one defending, but also launch the counterattacks, play that left winger. Yeah, you saw what he did in that Charlotte game, giving up that penalty, right? So, to me, then, this shows that these players, this Miami game shows the players can get up for big games. They can get up. They can be ready. They can lock it in, but then they don't most games. Okay. Again, just to summarize, I don't expect the Chicago Fire to score 4 games every match, but I do expect them to give a certain level of effort week in and week out. And the fact that they fell so flat on their faces in the Charlotte game just shows you, I think, that these guys can turn it on and off. And the fact that they don't have it on for most of the games this season is just an indictment of the culture that's been built with this current club. No winning mentality, no culture, no expectations, or from what we've seen, the expectations are at least the minimum. The players are just expected to go out and do the minimum, or the players are going to do the minimum, because what does it matter in the long run of things, right? A couple players accepted. So that's the long and the short of it for the Miami game. Now we are going to segue into our featured guest, John Donovan. He's got his takes on the Miami match and the Charlotte match. So on the YouTube side, we're going to pause for a brief few seconds while we splice in John's audio over on the podcast side. So again, make sure you're going and finding us, following along on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts for all the great takes from John Donovan. And with that, John, I'll turn it over to you. Well, thank you, John. We do appreciate you checking in with us every week, doing double duty this week. I know you don't usually do the midweek games, but I'm really glad you got your thoughts on the Miami match out here for everyone to listen to. And with John's takes then on the Charlotte match, a totally different match in every sense of it. Again, I titled this episode A Tale of Two Teams, even though we're talking about only the Chicago Fire, because they played like two different teams, despite having the same lineup from Wednesday to Saturday. I don't know. Do you think that tired them out a little bit? You know, when you're on that much adrenaline, I doubt it. Maybe the recovery does take a little longer, but dude, get up for the Charlotte game. Not like Charlotte are world beaters here, but they certainly treated the Fire like it. Now, looking at the Charlotte game, looking at the statistics, the Fire ended up with 45% possession, 11 shots, 3 shots on goal. So they had a little bit more possession by the numbers from that Miami game, but less shots on goal. Brady did end up getting credited with 3 saves in this one. Unfortunately, one of them couldn't be for the PK. And by the way, Enzo Capetti, not one of my favorite players. Just watching him this match, I don't watch a lot of Charlotte, but I feel like he's this way most of the time. Just a pain in the butt, a pest, and annoying, complaining. Nothing I like to watch on my TV screen. And even if I was a Charlotte fan, probably wouldn't be too thrilled with it. I don't know what he's done for his goal scoring or his assist numbers or what he's done for the team this year. Still think Karl Swiderski is their primary guy, and they've gotten a lot of good role players around them who've stepped up, was it Westwood who scored the first banger of a goal against Chicago. Ben Bender playing well, right? But Capetti, Petty is in your name, and it's fitting. Anyway, looking back at the stats, the Fire ended up with 351 total passes, only 74% passing accuracy. So they were either getting forward a lot and having high or low percentage passes, which I think was the issue here because we have 21 crosses on the night, or they were just sloppy with the ball. And I think there was probably a little bit of that too, especially when Charlotte only had 79% completion percentage on 8 crosses. So that I think there was just a lot of sloppy play. Second half of this game, Charlotte really killed a lot of momentum, slowed things down, wasted time, whatever dark arts gamesmanship you want to call it. Charlotte did it in that second half, and who can blame them, right? They're fighting for their playoff lives too. So a lot of sloppy play in this one. Fire ended up with 4 offsides, 2 yellow cards, and nothing to show for it. If you like XG, the Fire were expected to score 1 goal on their 11 shots. Their highest chance, Kasper Shabilko's 68th minute left-footed shot from practically point blank, and I have to say practically point blank because it's Kasper Shabilko shooting, and not most strikers. Most strikers would put that on frame. Most strikers would put that in the back of the net. But we're going back to pre-Miami game Kasper Shabilko, where you're missing sitters for $1 million a year. Thanks a lot. So for all the highs of that Wednesday win against Miami, we hit all the lows on Saturday, right? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Of Fire just teaching us physics here, right? Now that we've wrapped up the recaps I'd like to remind everyone of our sponsor, Skira Icelandic Spring Water, who's been a supporter and a sponsor of Feed the Fire from episode 1, from even when we were developing the show. Icelandic for clear, Skira water comes from a spring in a government-protected nature preserve in Iceland with naturally low mineral content. This isn't your average water. Clearly, pun intended, it's one of the best. Go out to your local 7-Eleven, stock up on a few bottles of Skira Icelandic spring water. Now, as we get into the second half of the show, I teased it earlier. I told you I'd give you a little bit of a darker history of me being a Chicago Fire fan for all these years. And unfortunately, it comes out of an incident that we saw at the Charlotte match in the fan section, where a season ticket holder, longtime supporter of the Chicago Fire, was escorted out by Monterrey Security. Again, it cracks me up. There's like 6 or 7 Monterrey security officers there to escort one young man out of the stadium. I also heard that another young black man was being frisked. I don't know why anyone was being frisked at a soccer game. You're already going through security to get in. Seems a little excessive / profiling on behalf of Monterrey Security. What I had heard, again, this is all the social media buzz. I haven't not corroborated, is that a fan in the fan section, the supporter section, had a road flare, threw a flare, whatever the case was. And when Monterrey Security showed up, they ID'd the wrong guys. They got the wrong people. Now, it's pretty despicable of the fan who actually threw the flare to not step up and say, yeah, it was me. Don't wrongfully detain these other guys. But I bring it up because I want to offer my support to those guys. If you're out there, if you're listening, reach out to me, because I actually had the same thing happen to me in 2010. It was my last month of law school out at Valparaiso, the once and former Valparaiso University School of Law. I had a bunch of buddies who were big soccer fans. Chicago Fire were in the playoffs. Again, 2010, years ago, right? The Chicago Fire were in the playoffs. That was one of those odd years where they took the top 6 teams in the East and West, and then like the next 4 best teams, regardless of conference. So Chicago was actually hosting Salt Lake in an Eastern Conference playoff game, Real Salt Lake. And we get to the game. I'm there with my friends. My one friend's brother drove down from outside of Milwaukee, I want to say, somewhere in Wisconsin. And we tell him, dude, don't do it. Don't bring it in. Don't bring it in. He says, okay, guys, I won't bring it in. I put it away. Well, as soon as we get into our seats, we're about 3 minutes into the game. My friend's younger brother pulls the road flare out of his pants. And this isn't some like novelty flare. This is like a full construction road flare that construction crews use on the highways, because his dad was a construction guy and he swiped it from his dad and he brought it to a Chicago Fire game and decided to wave it around the fan section. As a result, lit a few streamers on fire. I'm stomping out the fire. We're about 8-10 minutes into the match at this point. Next thing I know, I am being grabbed by my collar of my jersey and lifted up out of my seat by Monterrey Security, escorted to the concourse of Toyota Park, handcuffed and put in a detaining cell for the remainder of the first half, only for local police to pick me up and begin processing my arrest. It is a terrible, terrible moment. I had spoken to the security guys. I'm like, it wasn't me. It was the other kid in the row. I'll point him out to you. They're like, nope, we know it was you. And I said, no, you don't, dude. I'm in the fan section. Like, there's thousands of people all wearing red jerseys, swarming around, jumping, screaming, and yelling. You can't ID me. Like, I will give you the kid because I have my whole legal career here. If this arrest is on my record, my career is gone. I'm explaining this, and they didn't care. They just wanted to detain someone to show that they could do their job, that they're justifying why they're there. Get to the Bridgeview police station. They turn me over to the local sergeant there. Sergeant goes and takes the statement of the security guard, who, just like most security guards, probably a high school dropout, probably couldn't put 2 sentences together. Kind of wish we went to trial on this case just to see my attorney pick this guy apart on the stand. But anyway, the police sergeant comes back to me and looks at my name and goes, Israelines, are you Greek? And then I looked at the name on his badge, clearly Greek. I'm like, so he's whispering to me in Greek, like, this guy's an idiot. I know, like, you don't get involved in this stuff, I'm sure. Like, what are you doing out here? I'm like, taking a night off of studying from the bar exam to come to the soccer game. He's like, you're going to law school? You would never, like, you would, I know you'd never do this. I teach law classes. I know students would never do this. I go, yeah, well, here we are. So thankfully, the police sergeant was cool, let me off my own recognizance, called my uncle. Definitely didn't call my parents on that one. They would have killed me or left me there. We end up going to the initial hearing, and as it turns out, my lawyer goes, okay, opposing counsel, what's going on? Well, Monterrey Security wants your client banned for life from Soldier Field and from Toyota Park, and they want him to serve 300 days in jail and pay a fine. And my attorney stifling his laughter at these outrageous demands and says, okay, so where's the road flare that my client allegedly had? We don't have it. Well, where's the video of him that you allegedly have? Well, we don't have it. It's like, where's the corroborating witness statements? Well, we don't have any. He goes, so the only evidence you have is that one guy who doesn't have a high school education saying he saw my client in a sea of supporters with the road flare. And the plaintiff goes, yeah, can he just sign a form that says he did some community service and we'll drop the charges? so that's how that case got wrapped up. But that was a dark, dark day. And I tell this story because Monterrey Security has been pulling this junk for decades now. And it rears its ugly head on occasion. And if you don't know anything about Monterey Security, you're the lucky ones, because if you just look at them the wrong way at a Fire or a Bears game, they're going to hassle you. And there's a reason why that they are the subject, or have been the subject, of about a dozen different lawsuits against them for illegal detention, for battery, and for a whole list of other things. So to those gentlemen who were abused by Monterey Security, I completely understand the position you're in. If you ever want to talk about it from just a commiserating standpoint or from a legal standpoint, feel free to reach out to me. GlassHouseSoccer@gmail.com. Direct messages are open on Twitter. I'm with you guys, support you guys. If there's anything I can do to help, if there's any other fans that listen that want to connect me with them or want to try to help, I'm all in for that one. Now, with that out of the way, and just sharing a large piece of my history with all of you there, let's take a quick preview at this New York City match. And it's going to be a brief one because the match isn't until October 21st after the international break, which, by the way, speaking of international break, Brady and Gutierrez called up for Olympic team camp, U23 camp. Congrats. They're going to get released by the club. Thank goodness for that. But the match against New York City, the odds makers don't even have their odds up yet. I looked on FanDuel, BetMGM, Sportsopedia, whatever it is. They don't even have the odds up. It's too far out for them. But here's what's at stake. New York City is playing the Fire. Miami is playing Charlotte twice. Montreal is playing the Crew, and Nashville are playing the Red Bulls. Those are the impact games here for the playoff line. The Chicago Fire are sitting at 40 points. They're under the playoff line. In order to make it, if my terrible math is correct, the Fire will need, at an absolute minimum, a draw. They cannot lose and make the playoffs. They need at an absolute minimum a draw, but for sake of our argument here, we need to assume they need a win. And the Fire need to play like they need a win. They're not going to have the luxury of seeing what everyone else does. They need to win this game. If they do, they'll get bumped up to 43 points. Now, what they need from Red Bulls, as far as I can tell on this crazy table in the Eastern Conference, they need the Red Bulls to lose or draw, and they need Charlotte to win and draw at best. They would be tied with Charlotte on points, but the Fire would own the first tiebreaker by having one more win than Charlotte. Because as we know in MLS, the first tiebreaker is number of wins, not goal differential. The Fire could win this game. I mean, aliens could come down and tell us the secret to happiness too. But the Fire could win this game at New York because New York City hasn't looked overly convincing in their last 5 matches. 2 wins, 2 draws, and a loss. I mean, the loss was a bad loss. Draws were bad draws. And one of those wins was against Toronto. Wooden spoon winner. Congratulations, TFC won a trophy this year. Wooden spoon winner, TFC. Sorry, Jay and Mike, if you're listening. So this is a very winnable game for the Fire. On the plus side, they should get some guys back from injuries. They should be a little deeper. They're going to have time to rest, time to game plan. They've got 2 weeks to game plan for one game. And if their game plan and tactics are a failure, then just wipe the whole coaching staff off of this organization's payroll. because that would just be just the last nail in the coffin of whatever ineptitude the coaching staff has been this season. Now, New York City, though, they're coming off the same advantages. They're going to be rested. I don't think they have too many guys getting called up on international duty. The Fire, I don't think have any over this break. Again, Brady and Gutierrez maybe for U23 camp. But here's the thing. I don't think the Chicago Fire have it in them to play up to this moment. Yeah, they did it against Miami, but we saw that was a fluke. They couldn't even carry it over 3 days later to the Charlotte game. Okay? Also, you want to look at the Chicago Fire's results this season? They've only won back-to-back games twice, and then on a third occasion had a 3-game win streak. And that's what they need here. They need a win streak. That's how they need to play. They needed to have won the game against Miami, won or draw against Charlotte, and then win against New York City. I don't think the Fire have it in them to put these great performances back to back. And even if they do win in NYC, then we can't expect them to do anything should they actually make that playoff game. I don't think the Fire have it in them. Now, I will say the Fire have put together a few 4-game, 5-6-game point streaks where they were picking up a win, a couple draws, and then another win, a draw, win kind of a situation. But last game of the season, after the letdown against Charlotte, I don't think the coaching staff and I don't think the players have it within them to rise to this occasion at New York. But hey, maybe 2 weeks removed is just what they need. Maybe that's going to get their heads right. Maybe they can lock it in for 90 minutes, but I'm not optimistic. We'll see how things shake out in the next couple of weeks. What really hurts is that everything from a scheduling perspective really lined up for the Chicago Fire to just make the playoffs by winning a couple games, picking up some extra points. They played over the last 4 games of the season, 4 or 5 games of the season, every team that was at or below them in the playoff standings. I think with one exception, playing a higher seeded team. Not bad for the Fire, and they could not take advantage of it. I don't see any reason for them to change course and take advantage of it this game. But we'll see. That's why they play 90, to prove podcasters like me wrong. Now, real quick, we got to get into some Fire news here. Adrian Heath was fired by Minnesota United. Do we want to see him in Chicago? I put a Twitter poll out for a little bit. The vote was about split. I think it was about 53-47 in favor or against. 53-47 against. I was going to say in favor of not having Adrian Heath. And that's fine with me. I do not want Adrian Heath here as the Chicago Fire coach. The reality is I think they already have their coach lined up. Kostenoglu on the sideline, currently just an assistant. I think he'll get elevated in the offseason. However, that being put aside for sake of argument, I do not want Adrian Heath. I think he was an excellent coach in the Orlando days. I think he was really, really good for Minnesota, but we have seen him max out what he could get out of these teams. And I think the little bit of the taint of the Reynoso scandal, saga, drama, whatever it is, I don't know what exactly went on, and I don't want that to happen with him and another player on the Chicago Fire. But we've seen him kind of max out his potential. And Minnesota, not known for spending, but not known for being cheapskates either. They have constructed some decent rosters, but I just don't think Heath was able to match up with the powerhouses of the Western Conference, and I don't think he'd be able to do that in Chicago as well. Also, the other news that Chicago Fire fans were very upset to hear was that it is more than likely George Heitz, sporting director, is going to be given an extension. Yep, that's right. Most likely he's going to get an extension. Now, the speculation there is, or I'm sorry, a sporting director, general manager, you call it that. I forget his exact title because I've ignored it for so long. The speculation is that he is actually going to not have a direct day-to-day impact, that he is going to be there for higher level decisions, more kind of bridging the gap between Lugano and Chicago Fire and seeing how those clubs can work together, make some kind of joint decisions, maybe like working his way into like an ownership group kind of a thing, right? Like, I'm not the Chicago Fire guy or the Lugano guy or the Chicago Fire and Lugano guy. I am Mansueto Football Group guy. that I think would be an ideal situation for all parties. Mansueto gets an experienced executive to kind of start his football soccer empire. Heitz gets to make bigger decisions, which probably isn't too terrible at. I don't know. Because I don't know a lot of what he's done on the business side, but he gets to keep his job. Mansueto gets to show, reward the loyalty and do that. And then the Chicago Fire can go ahead and hire someone else to do some more day-to-day decisions, or get a coach in who will have a lot more control over the kinds of players that are being signed, giving a lot of player profiles instead of just, whatever the executives are throwing at them, whatever they think is good at the time and might not even mesh with the team or the coaching style. I hope that's what it is. That was the initial speculation, that Heitz is going to almost fail upward in a sense and get promoted out of some of this day-to-day stuff. I think that's the best case for all parties, other than Heitz being gone, Pelzer being gone, coaching staff being gone, and starting all over with the new MLS experienced coaching staff and executive staff. Here was the big news. This was crazy to hear, and I loved hearing it. And I know we're running really long in this episode, but you got 2 weeks to listen to it, so I'm not going to apologize right now. Djordje Mihailovic is interested in a return to Chicago, to the Chicago Fire. Now, this was reported on by Men in Red's Alex Calabrese and confirmed by, I don't know, I'll call him Fire Insider Tyrus Rose on Twitter. This is huge that Mihailovic wants to come back to the Chicago Fire. As we know, the Fire traded him to Montreal for $1 million in GAM, which a lot of money at the time, but still undervalued Mihailovic's importance and talent. Mihailovic played really well for Montreal, who then flipped him to AZ Alkmaar in the Dutch league, I believe. Didn't get a lot of time over there. Maybe a couple goals and a couple assists, maybe in 8 matches that he appeared in. So he has not been able to break into the regular starting role over there. So for him to come back to Chicago could really show a resurgence in his career, could position him for some USMNT call-ups, get him that regular playing time that Berhalter and his staff like to see. I'm not getting into a Greg Berhalter discussion, just table that aside, but get him the regular playing time, get him playing against some quality competition, as well as get his head right, get back to family. That was the reason he cited for wanting to come back to Chicago, to be closer to home, to be closer to family. Traveling across Europe might not be the best move for everybody. And we have seen not just Americans in MLS, but other international players in MLS who have a much better family life than having to go to a middle tier league in Europe or in South America to try and ply their trade and to try and impress the national team coaches. So this could be a win-win-win-win. It could be a win for Mihailovic, for the Fire, for MLS, and for the USMNT to keep developing a younger player and keep a close eye on him. So I would love to see that. And with that, MLS fans, soccer fans, Chicago Fire fans, thank you for sticking with me through what was a much longer episode than I expected, but wanted to leave you with some good stories as well as some good content on the Chicago Fire. Remember, share the link, share the show, subscribe, like, rate, review. Help us grow the Feed the Fire podcast so we can continue spreading the word about the Chicago Fire, growing the conversation around soccer in America, as well as just, meeting people, having fun, talking soccer, talking Fire. With that, I'll thank you and enjoy your night. Let's go Fire.